Hey guys, it's Danielle with Pure Root Wellness. Today's topic is one of my absolute favorites. It is called leaky gut. So we will talk a little bit about what it is, kind of the brief physiology and breakdown of what leaky gut is, and then obviously ways to improve. If you think you have leaky gut, I should say. So, sounds absolutely awful, but what is it? Leaky gut really stems from damage to the underlying gut microbes or the bugs that are inside the intestines. When you start to damage these bugs, it can cause increased permeability or kind of leakiness or holes within the inside lining of the gut. In turn, this releases a lot of noxious bacterial endotoxins, and these toxins that are released are actually by the gut bacteria themselves. So the bacteria themselves are able to release these kind of not dangerous, but just toxic or noxic chemicals within the body. So when these holes, the gut lining kind of opens up, and there's holes within kind of the blood gut barrier. This allows for bacteria, antigens, toxic substances to really pass through the intestines into this kind of throughout this blood gut barrier, which ultimately creates an immune response. Your body kind of looks at this like, oh, there's something that got through that shouldn't have gotten through. I need to now rev up my immune system to make sure that this isn't something that's going to harm me. This is just kind of a picture that kind of depicts what I was just saying in regards to, on the left you have symbiosis, which is just a good harmony between the good and bad bacteria. Or I shouldn't even say bad, it's just a good ratio between bacteria that could be harmful and bacteria that keeps those harmful bacteria at bay. So they're constantly, saying, no, I'm going to take over because they ate great food, or no, I'm going to take over because you were eating garbage. It's pretty much like the overall basis. The dysbiosis is just that. When you start to get into, again, I'll just quote the bad bacteria, even though it's not bad, it's just in an unequal ratio of the bacteria that should have been kept at bay. But dietary changes and inflammatory changes basically altered that ratio and began to have breakdown of that intestinal barrier. And then once you get into the leaky gut syndrome, you can see that nice cushy barrier that was over the cells themselves completely dissipates, and then the cells themselves start to kind of spread apart from each other, and you can see the autoantigen kind of bacteria come through, and that's when your immune system says, "Ooh, okay, we need to go check this out. We need to call in all the troops, show that there's an inflammatory, response or process going on here, and we may need to get rid of whatever is leaking through that shouldn't be leaking through." Conditions that can lead to leaky gut. Obviously, dietary choices are going to be a huge factor in this. You eat like garbage, you eat like crap, your gut is not going to know what to do with it. Your gut can't use it, right? So these chemicals and these, unusable nutrients, I should say, if you even want to label them nutrients, your body just doesn't know how to break them down, and indirectly it'll just start breaking down the lining for you. There's obviously, it's more complicated than that, but eating, the right foods in general, unprocessed, nothing that goes in a microwave half the time. If you can't read something on the label, if you don't even know what the component or chemical is, how the heck do you think your body is going to be able to identify and use it as appropriate nutrients, vitamins, minerals? Stress is a big factor, obviously. We live in a day and age where stress is high all the time. Stress obviously can be a huge contributor to what goes on in your gut health and how your gut ultimately responds to the environment that you live in. And leaky gut can be kind of a correlating factor with high level stress. Infections, as we all know, infections can lead to the dysbiosis or the lack of gut harmony as well. When there's an infectious process, there's inflammation. When there's inflammation, things don't function as they normally should. So, and again, can contribute to developing leaky gut syndrome. Systemic inflammation, that's just what you think it is, kind of systemically having a broad inflammatory process going on. Your gut responds to that as well. I've said it before in other podcasts, but 70% of your immune system lies within your gut, kind of throughout. So it's very important that there is a connection between systemic inflammation and infectious processes and gut health. Low stomach acid. I'm pretty sure everybody and their brother is on some type of anti-acid in the United States. Protonics, Pepsids, Nexiums, all the things that kind of help the stomach acid stay low. The problem with that is you are teeing yourself up for a successful leaky gut, just given that the stomach acid is there for a reason. If you can hold on long enough to get through kind of the transient, if you have heartburn and acid reflux and things of that nature, indirectly, sometimes you're causing more problems down the road by being on these PPIs and all of these things for a long period of time. They weren't designed to be long-term medications, and unfortunately we're keeping a lot of people on them and starting to see some of the non-benefits of them in a long-term period case. Toxin exposure, the pesticides that are normally in foods can obviously cause some detrimental effects to the inner lining of the gut. NSAIDs, so Advil, ibuprofen, Aleve, we've known for years and years that these medications and these anti-inflammatories, yes, they're helpful, but they're also doing kind of a secondary damage to your gut health. And then antibiotics alone. We all know, again, people take antibiotics, and what you're doing is not only are you killing the bad bacteria, but you're killing the good bacteria as well. So you start to get that dysbiosis, which again kind of tees you up for a lack of kind of good versus bad, and the bad sometimes will be able to overcome. Now, that isn't without saying if you need to be on a PPI for some type of esophageal cancers, and I prescribe antibiotics pretty much every single day. I try and be a good antibiotic steward, at work, but there is a right time and a right place for a lot of these medications. So I'm not dissing them all. I'm just saying I think we need to be cognizant of the long-term effects and what the downstream effect can be from some of these. So how do you know you have leaky gut? Well, there's some generalized symptoms that include like bloating, indigestion, constipation, even diarrhea. The fatigue comes from kind of the malnourishment aspect of the gut lining and breakdown, and then weight gain. I thought that was kind of interesting when looking at like the weight gain. You have people who are like, I'm doing all the right things. I'm trying to eat healthy. I'm walking, I'm working out, I'm doing all the things, and I'm gaining weight, or I'm at a stalemate. The reality is these bugs that are in your gut have already been kind of programmed in a certain way just based off of previous diets and things of that nature to hold on to the weight. And one study I thought that was really interesting. They were actually looking at human twins. One was slim, one was obese. They took the gut microbes from both of these humans and transferred them into a germ-free mice, or mouses, I should say, mice. The mice who received the obese twins bacteria basically became obese, and the microbes from the lean twin kept the other mouse lean. Both mice ate the same diet, just to take that factor out of the equation. And the difference really was, I guess the take home that they saw was the microbial diversity that they had seen in the lean human being transferred to the lean mouse. That was the key, was the microbial diversity. So it's just very interesting. We use things on a daily basis that deter or break down the diversity of these bugs, and we don't let them flourish and let them create this awesome, symbiosis of a world where they can protect us almost. I just thought it was really interesting, just transferring all of those gut bugs into, another creature and watching it kind of mimic exactly what you saw within the human population was pretty cool. There are some tests out there that can kind of give you some tidbits on if there is an underlying leaky gut, maybe syndrome going on. There's nothing concrete that's like, oh yeah, if you do this test, you're 100% know you have leaky gut. But there is a lot of information and new tests that are available. One of them being the mannitol and lactulose test. This tends to be kind of the standardized test to see if there is like a leaky gut syndrome that we may be looking at. And the mannitol and lactulose, they're basically water-soluble molecules. They're sugars, and the body can't use these. The mannitol is easily absorbed by people with healthy intestinal linings, and the lactulose is really a larger molecule, and it's only just barely absorbed within the intestinal tract. So someone will come in, they'll drink both of the solutions, and then after about 6 hours, they'll look at the urine, and the amount of each of the mannitol and lactulose that is present in the urine reflects actually how much was absorbed by the body. So a healthy test will show high levels of mannitol and low levels of lactulose, which makes sense, right? The lactulose is a bigger molecule. If you have leaky gut and these molecules are making it through into the system, there is probably a component of something leaking through and having leaky gut. A healthy test shows if high levels of both molecules are found, that indicates a leaky gut condition as well. And then if there's low levels of both, we're actually looking at maybe a malabsorption of some of the nutrients. So kind of interesting, real simple, easy test. Whether it's actually specific to put a stamp on it and say, yes, you have leaky gut. But I think it's a good place to start for people who are struggling with, kind of all of these things on the left side here and getting a little bit more information to make some educated decisions. One of the other tests that I had personally done was Viome. I thought it was absolutely wonderful. I sent in blood and a stool sample. Took a little bit as far as processing the samples themselves, but they came back. You download the app or you can go online and it literally will give you just a plethora of information in regards to your overall health, your gut health, each individual bacteria that's in your microbiome. But the cool part was they kept it very simple and basic to understand. And then if you wanted to kind of keep going down what I call like these nerd rabbit holes, just with gut health, you were able to. They kept giving you more information, and it was all it was evidence-based. It was amazing. I had my husband do it. I recommended it to my mother-in-law. You can see my puppy dog. He's getting sick of me talking about all this gut health. I think the best bang for your buck was the Viome kit that I ended up sending in. And then there's other ones like Everly Well, looking more at food sensitivities, metabolism, and then gut health tests, just looking at another analysis of the microbiome. So different types of leaky gut tests, I should say. I started to learn a little bit more about these just setting up for this podcast. I've heard before on other people, other researchers, other podcasts talking about zonulin and how zonulin actually is something that regulates these tight junctions in the small intestine. And zonulin secretion is induced by the presence of a pathogenic bacteria or other kind of bacteria that are present. Elevated levels of zonulin indicate increased intestinal permeability and a compromised brush border. So again, maybe another test that can, again, give you a little more clarification on what the gut is doing and what are these junctions or these cells? Are they tight? Are they apart? Kind of what's going on just based off of the leakiness of the zonulin showing up. Lipopolysaccharides are another molecule that when are elevated, you're looking at, possibly identifying leaky gut and maybe its severity. LPS is actually a part of the membrane on gram-negative enteric bacteria. So it kind of encapsulates the bacteria. This increases inflammation and cytokines when they're high in the blood. An intact brush border, an intact border of the intestinal tract prevents this LPS from interacting with the GALT or the gut associated lymphoid tissue, and thereby reducing the risk of systemic inflammation. So if LPS antibodies are found in the blood, they reflect a GALT interaction and again can serve as a useful marker in identifying leaky gut and its severity. So all of these kind of communications to sit there and go, well, we found this, there may be, again, some component of lack of, intactment at the cellular level. This actomyosin was kind of interesting. I'd never heard of it, again, until I was kind of setting up for this podcast. But when the tight junctions are compromised or the gut lining is compromised, the actomyosin component becomes exposed. And actomyosin is actually what holds the tight junctions together. So when the tight junctions begin to leak, exposed actomyosin may actually trigger antibody production, and it basically degrades the actomyosin. These antibodies to the actomyosin are easily measured in the blood and again are maybe a valuable marker in detecting mucosal damage and increased intestinal permeability. And then Occluding Clawden, these are also multi-protein junctional complexes. Their general function is to prevent leakage of transported solutes in water, and it seals that cellular pathway. So, I'm not going to go over like IgA, IgG, stool tests, all the vitamins, mineral tests. There's lots of things out there that can just give you more information, more data to kind of lean one way or the other and say, oh yes, this looks like this is what's happening in your intestinal tract. And this is just talking about the Occluding Clawden. I thought this was a really good picture to depict just how these Clawdens and Occludens, they come together. And if you have breakdown of these and they start showing up within the blood system, it kind of makes sense, right? If they're broken down and showing up in the blood when they actually should be intact and keeping the intestinal lining together, it should raise a little bit of a red flag that something was broken down at that cellular level and things are starting to kind of come apart. So ways to improve leaky gut. Number one take home is increase your intake of short chain fatty acids. Short chain fatty acid butyrate actually repairs leaky gut by modifying these junctional proteins that I was just showing you, all of these proteins that kind of help hold the glue together. How do you do that? Well, you start eating fiber, and then more fibrous foods. The colon bugs gobble up the fiber and release these short chain fatty acids. So it's not a matter of, this is what's wild. You can't just sit there and go, give me a short chain fatty acid pill. There are some supplements out there that can help to benefit, short chain fatty acid, but the foods you eat are then taken in by the bugs themselves, and those bugs are the ones that actually release the short chain fatty acid. So the bugs are doing all of the hard work. All we have to do is eat the right beneficial, nutritious food to give them exactly what they need to produce the appropriate fatty acids that we need. I know when we talk about fiber, it gets confusing because you're like, well, is it soluble? Is it insoluble? It's super simple. Soluble dissolves in water. Insoluble does not dissolve in water. Good news, plants have both, so you don't have to worry about it. When you're eating a plant-based diet, you don't have to sit there and go, well, is it soluble? Is it insoluble? I'm not talking like the Metamucil that your, grandma puts in the water and you drink, your Metamucil for the day. I'm talking about getting solid, fibrous, nutritional, plant-based, foods that the body and the bugs, the microbiome itself, or the microbiota can use to release, SCFA butyrate. Another kind of way to improve, I talked about the plant-based meals, considering maybe one day a week of fasting for maybe close to 16 hours. I have another fasting podcast that, kind of talks all about that. But really giving your gut a little bit of a break for a good duration of a period it helps, right? If you're constantly asking, sleep. We shut our mind down, right? We shut the engines down, and that's our time to heal, our time to regenerate cells, and wake up feeling kind of refreshed. If we're constantly bombarding the gut with food all the time, we're never giving the body and the inner lining of the gut a chance to just kind of heal, shut down the engines, and recuperate. So really considering at least maybe 1 day a week fasting for 16 hours. So let's get into the foods you can eat. Foods produced by bacterial fermentation are really enriched with short chain fatty acids. So you're looking at a lot of almonds, chickpeas, apples, garlic, asparagus, broccoli, oat bran, tofu, tempeh, brown rice, lentils, green bananas. I personally love green bananas, like not to the point where they're almost yellow. They're still a little green. Oh, they're my favorite. And then once they get kind of yellow, I'm like, I'm good. But all of these foods are going to promote the bacterial fermentation that releases these short chain fatty acids that are beneficial for repairing the gut lining. Inulin, you can get this in supplemental form, but it's basically a soluble fiber, and it's a type of like fructan. It's found highly in chicory root. I have a picture up there if you wanted to know what chicory root looked like. Pectin fruits, so peaches, apples, oranges, grapefruits. Butter actually has a good percentage of butyric acid in it. Ghee, ghee is something I'm just starting to learn about, which is awesome. It's actually a clarified butter, and it's butter that's been kind of simmered and strained to remove all the water, but the clarifying process also removes a lot of casein and lactose, which makes it kind of suitable for people who are dairy sensitive. So kind of something new that it's been around forever. It's not like it's like new to the world, but something that, just starting to kind of look into and kind of raise the eyebrow in my world a little bit. Kefir, yogurt, kefir is just fermented milk that can be made out of any type of milk. Goat, cow, coconut, rice, soy, sheep. Really just think of kefir as kind of a drinkable yogurt with a tangy kind of acidic flavor. So that's kind of, the breakdown a little bit of how to increase your short chain fatty acid, which will ultimately help to repair your gut. Fiber, I can't speak enough about fiber. We as Americans are horrible at eating fiber. Like, given, looking at other populations that are have huge gut diversity, they eat just fiber on top of fiber on top of fiber on top of fiber, and their risk of certain intestinal cancers is like nil to none compared to what we see here in the US. And again, I think it just stems from our westernized diet and the crap and the processed stuff that we eat. There's over 400,000 plants on this planet, 300,000 of them being edible. Looking at us as humans, we only have 17 enzymes that actually help our bodies break down this fiber to get the SCFA benefits. But our gut our gut bugs have over 60,000 of these beneficial enzymes that could break this down to get us our short chain fatty acids. So it's not rocket science, right? Like, let the bugs do the work. Just give the bugs exactly what they need to do the work. And I would like to think that a good majority of the health ailments of IBS and autoimmunity problems, will start to kind of dwindle a little bit. We have the information, we have the resources, we know what we should be eating. Does it suck and is it kind of hard? Yeah. But when you reap the benefits of what could come about from it, it's kind of a no-brainer. So here's all my references. And that's really it for leaky gut. There's obviously a lot more information out there, but I like to keep these podcasts and videos kind of short and sweet. give you the gist. If there's any questions, comments, concerns, tidbits, things that you want me to delve a little further into, just let me know. Otherwise, I hope everyone is doing well and be well, and see you guys soon.